Ever wonder why the universe is so quiet? Let's talk about a chilling idea called the Great Filter.
So, it all begins with just a dead planet. How does it actually come alive?
I mean, what are the insane odds that need to be beaten for that to happen?
Well, that's the story of the great filters and how life on Earth somehow made it.
The first filter might just be the biggest one, life from non-life, or abiogenesis.
And this wasn't some lightning strike. It was a super slow, complex process over eons.
Somehow, basic chemistry became self-replicating life, and just like that, filter 1 was passed.
But then, in a crazy twist, life almost destroyed the very planet it was born on.
See, early photosynthesis started pumping out what was then a toxic poison, free oxygen.
And the result? Yeah, a devastating mass extinction event.
They call it the oxygen catastrophe. It was a total reset that nearly ended everything.
But here's the thing, passing one filter can actually set the stage for the next giant leap.
More oxygen meant more energy, which fueled the evolution of bigger, more complex life.
This kicked off the Cambrian explosion. Almost all modern animal blueprints appeared, seemingly overnight.
So life was getting diverse, but it wasn't out of the woods yet, not by a long shot.
Take the Great Dying, about 250 million years ago. Life on Earth was nearly wiped out.
Think about it, 96% of all marine species just gone.
And on land? About 70% of everything just vanished.
What caused it? A perfect storm of planetary disasters, all hitting at once.
So, you see, each of these was a huge filter that life barely squeezed through to survive.
The main takeaway here is that we're the result of an incredibly unlikely series of survivals.
So that leaves a big question. Is the universe's silence all about our past, or is it about our future?
I want you to try something for me, just for a moment.
Okay.
Imagine you're standing out in the middle of a desert.
Right.
It's midnight, there's no moon, the air is incredibly dry and cold, and there's just this deep, low wind blowing across the sand.
That's a very specific vibe.
Yeah, well, you're out there, and because there are no city lights for hundreds of miles, when you look up, the sky isn't black.
Right. It's
crowded.
Yeah.
It is absolutely crushed with stars. Thousands of them. You can see that smear of milk spilled across the center, which is our galaxy.
It's a beautiful image, but, if you really understand what you're looking at, it's also a deeply haunting one.
Exactly. And that's the exact feeling I want to get at today. Because when we look up at that sky, we see light. We see history.
Yeah.
But if we were to close our eyes and point our radio telescope at that exact same patch of sky, listening for, I don't know, a pattern, a rhythm, a hello.
You'd hear nothing.
Absolutely nothing, just the hiss of background radiation, the static of the Big Bang.
Great silence.
Right. And we know, thanks to the Kepler mission and tons of other observations, we know those stars aren't lonely.
Far from it. Most of them have planets.
And many of those planets are sitting right in the Goldilocks zone. Not too hot, not too cold.
Where water creates oceans, chemistry happens.
Right. So by all rights, the galaxy should be a cacophony. It should be like Times Square on a Saturday night.
But instead, it's a library after closing time.
Exactly.
This is really the heart of the Fermi paradox. Enrico Fermi, the physicist, was he was sitting at lunch back in 1950 chatting about aliens with some colleagues.
As you do.
Right, and he just suddenly asked, "Where is everybody?"
Yeah.
And it wasn't a casual question, it was a statistical accusation.
I love that phrasing, a statistical accusation.
Well, it is. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. Earth is only 4.5 billion years old. So if intelligence is just a natural progression of biology, there should be civilizations out there that are billions of years ahead of us.
They should have colonized the entire galaxy by now.
Easily. Even at slow, sublight speeds, you can cross the Milky Way in a few million years, which is just a blink of an eye in cosmic time.
But they aren't here.
No.
And they aren't radioing us.
No.
Which leads us to the dark conclusion. The concept that basically frames our entire conversation today. The Great Filter.
Right. The Great Filter is the idea that there is some massive, almost impenetrable barrier in the timeline of life.
A bottleneck.
A huge bottleneck. There is a step or maybe multiple steps, that is so difficult, so unlikely, or so incredibly dangerous that almost nobody survives it, it stops dead matter from becoming a spacefaring civilization.
And the really terrifying part is the placement of that filter.
Yeah.
It's either behind us or it's ahead of us.
Exactly. If it's behind us, that means we've already done the impossible, we've won the cosmic lottery, we are very, very special.
Which is comforting.
It is. But if the filter is ahead of us, well, then we're just walking down the exact same path as a million other dead civilizations, blissfully unaware that there's a cliff edge approaching that wipes everyone out.
So today, in this deep dive, we're going to try to figure out exactly where that cliff is. And we're not just going to, speculate with sci-fi tropes.
No, we have a stack of research here today that is honestly pretty heavy.
It's incredibly heavy. It's physics, it's geology, and it's some very high-level mathematics.
We're going to be pulling from 3 really distinct areas. First, we're looking at the thermodynamic origin of life, which suggests that life didn't just happen by accident, but was actually forced into existence by the laws of heat.
Which is a wild concept.
It is. Second, we're going to look at the hard steps of evolution. These are the biological bottlenecks where life on Earth almost stalled out forever.
Right.
And finally, we're going to look at a relatively new theory called the entropic resonance principle, ERP.
This one blew my mind.
It's fascinating because it uses the golden ratio, yes, actual math from art and nature, to explain how consciousness manages to stay afloat in a totally chaotic universe.
Okay, so it's a lot to unpack for you listening, but let's start at the very beginning. And I mean the absolute beginning, before there were dinosaurs, before there were even cells. Let's go back to the Archean Earth.
The Archean era. We're talking 3.8, maybe 4 billion years ago.
Right.
And for this, you have to completely forget the blue marble you see in NASA photos. This was a radically different planet.
Yeah, what did it look like?
The sky wasn't blue. It was likely this hazy orange or pink color because of all the methane in the air.
Wow.
The oceans were green, completely saturated with dissolved iron. There was virtually 0 oxygen in the atmosphere. And crucially, there was absolutely no ozone layer.
Okay, that lack of an ozone layer is key here, right? Because today, the ozone is what protects us from the sun's nastiest UV rays.
Yeah.
But back then, the surface was just getting totally hammered.
It was being bathed in intense ultraviolet light, specifically in the UVC spectrum.
Which is bad news.
It's very bad news. This is extremely high energy radiation. To biological life as we know it today, UVC is lethal. It shreds DNA. It sterilizes surfaces completely. It's literally what we use in hospitals today to kill bacteria.
Right. They shine those UV lights in the operating rooms to make sure nothing survives.
Exactly.
So logically, you'd think life would try to hide from this stuff.
You would.
You'd think the first molecules would form deep down in the ocean, near some hydrothermal vent, or under layers of rock, safe from the death rays.
That is definitely the intuitive assumption. But this is where our first source, this incredible paper by Carl Michaelian, completely flips the table.
Yeah, he proposes the thermodynamic origin of life.
Right. And his argument starts with redefining what life actually is, but through the eyes of a physicist.
Because physicists don't really care about reproduction or survival instincts in the way biologists do they?
Not at the fundamental level, no. They care about energy.
Right.
To a physicist, nature has one overriding, unstoppable desire, and that is to increase entropy.
And entropy is a word that gets thrown around a lot. People usually just mean disorder, like a messy bedroom.
Right, but that's a bit lazy. In thermodynamics, entropy is really about the dissipation of energy gradients.
How so?
Well, if you have a massive concentration of energy, like a hot star sitting in a cold, empty, vacuumous nature, desperately wants to spread that energy out.
It wants to smooth things over.
Exactly. It wants to explore all the available microstates. It wants to take that high-quality, highly concentrated photon from the sun and degrade it into low-quality scattered heat.
So the universe essentially hates a hoard. It wants to redistribute the wealth of energy.
That's a perfect way to put it. The sun is hoarding energy. The Earth is this relatively cool rock floating nearby, so the sun blasts the Earth with photons.
Okay.
Now, a bare rock or a pool of plain water is okay at absorbing that light and turning it into heat, but it's not great at it.
It reflects some of it back into space.
It reflects some, it transmits some. Michaelian argues that the laws of thermodynamics literally demanded a more efficient mechanism to degrade that incoming solar energy.
And that mechanism is us.
Well, eventually us. But originally the mechanism was RNA and DNA.
This is the part that took me a minute to wrap my head around.
It's a huge paradigm shift. Michaelian suggests we need to stop looking at RNA as genetic material for a second and just look at it as a physical material.
Like a physical substance sitting on the surface of the water.
Right. And he points out something incredibly suspicious about the 4 bases of life: adenine, guanine, cytosine, and uracil.
These are the fundamental letters of the genetic code, A, G, C, U.
Yes. It turns out these specific molecules are mathematically the most efficient of all known molecules at absorbing UVC light in the 260 nanometer range.
Wait.
They are organic pigments. They are perfectly tuned antenna for the exact specific color of light that was hitting the Archean Earth.
Hold on. You're saying that the fundamental building blocks of life are physically optimized to catch the very radiation that supposedly destroys them.
They are optimized to catch it, and this is the absolute crucial part, to dissipate it.
Okay, walk me through that.
When a photon of UVC hits an RNA base, the molecule starts to vibrate incredibly fast. It creates what physics calls a conical intersection.
Right.
In roughly a picosecond.
Which is a trillionth of a second.
Yes, unimaginably fast. In a picosecond, it takes that dangerous high-energy photon and converts it completely into harmless heat, which it just dumps into the surrounding water.
So they aren't hiding from the light. They're heat sinks.
They are microscopic radiators.
That is unbelievable.
They are the most efficient entropy generators the planet could possibly build under those conditions. The theory essentially suggests that RNA didn't evolve to carry information.
The information part was an accident.
It was a side effect. RNA evolved because the Earth needed a way to sweat. The RNA, floating on the surface of the green iron ocean, absorbed the harsh sun, heated up the water molecules around them, and literally drove the global water cycle.
Because hot water evaporates.
They caused the evaporation, they created the clouds, they summoned the hurricanes.
Which then mixes the atmosphere and creates even more entropy. It's like this cascading physical machine.
Exactly. Life is an irreversible process that facilitates the entropy production of the Earth. We aren't fighting the second law of thermodynamics. We are its agents.
We are the universe's air conditioning system.
We are here because the universe wanted to cool itself down.
That reframes the whole accident theory of life entirely. It makes it sound like life is inevitable. If you have a bright star on a wet rock, the physics will just naturally push matter to organize into these UV-eating shapes.
Michaelian even proposes a mechanism for how they replicated before enzymes existed.
Because today, you need all these complex proteins to copy DNA, right?
Right. But back then, he suggests the day-night cycle did the copying.
How does that work?
During the day, the intense UV and the heat would actually separate the RNA strands. This is called denaturing. They pop open to expose more surface area and absorb more light.
They uncoil to catch the rays.
Yes. Then, at night, the surface of the ocean cools down. The strands come back together using those cooler temperatures to bond with new, free-floating nucleotides in the primordial soup.
So the Earth's literal rotation was the engine. The planet itself was the photocopier.
Yes. It's a UV-driven polymerase chain reaction. The environment didn't just passively host life, it mechanically cranked it out day by day.
Okay, I am totally with you on the thermodynamics. It makes a ton of sense. It gives life a physical, measurable purpose. But this actually makes the Fermi paradox so much worse, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, think about it. If thermodynamics pushes for life to start, if it's basically a mathematical requirement of physics, then life should be everywhere.
Right.
Every single Goldilocks planet in the galaxy should be absolutely covered in this UV-eating slime. So why is the night sky silent? This implies the great filter isn't at the origin of life. The filter has to be later.
That is the chilling implication. Starting the fire is easy. The universe wants the fire to start.
But keeping it burning.
Keeping it burning and turning that primitive fire into a complex civilization. That is where the entropic resonance comes in.
Which brings us nicely to the second part of our stack of research.
Yes.
The entropic resonance principle, or ERP, developed by Mohammed Khorwat.
This paper was...
It was dense.
Incredibly dense, but profound.
It's dealing with how systems actually persist over time. Because sure, thermodynamics wants to dissipate energy. We just established that.
Yeah.
But life also has to stay organized while it does that.
It's a tightrope walk.
Right. If I dissipate too much energy, I just burn up and disintegrate. If I don't dissipate enough, I starve and die.
It's the classic ancient battle between order and chaos. But Khorwat reframes it in a totally new mathematical way. He says persistence isn't about building a wall against chaos.
You can't just block it out.
No, it's about resonance. He uses a specific variable, R, for coherence.
Meaning?
That's your internal structure, your order, your rules.
Okay.
And he uses H for entropy, the disorder, the noise, the raw energy flowing through you from the environment.
And the goal isn't just to minimize entropy to zero.
Definitely not, because if you minimize entropy to zero, you're a crystal.
You're frozen.
You're dead static.
Yeah.
The goal is to maintain a very specific dynamic relationship between how your internal structure changes, which is dr, and how much entropy you process dh.
Right.
And this is where the math gets almost mystical, although it is strictly grounded in wave mechanics. The paper derives a value for this relationship, a constant of persistence.
Lambda.
Lambda is approximately equal to 0.4812.
And this number 0.4812 is directly related to the golden ratio, right? The famous 1.618, usually denoted as phi.
Yes. Specifically, lambda is the natural logarithm of the golden ratio.
Okay, I have to stop you there.
I knew you would.
Because whenever I hear the phrase golden ratio in a modern scientific context, my alarm bells just go off.
It sounds a bit like numerology.
It does. It's always like, oh, the spirals of the pine cones and the shape of the galaxies and the pillars of the Greek temples all match this magic number.
Right.
Why would the fundamental gritty physics of staying alive care about an aesthetic proportion from art class?
That is a very healthy skepticism. I had the same reaction. But in physics, and particularly in wave mechanics, the golden ratio is unique for a very functional, non-mystical reason.
Which is?
It is mathematically the most irrational number.
Meaning you can't write it as a simple fraction.
Right, meaning it is the absolute hardest number to approximate with a fraction.
Why does that matter for staying alive?
Think about pushing a child on a swing.
Okay.
If you push at the exact right moment, a simple ratio, like a 1-to-1 ratio, you get constructive resonance. The swing goes higher and higher.
And higher until they loop over the top.
Right. In engineering, uncontrolled constructive resonance is usually bad. It shatters wine glasses. It collapses bridges.
Like the famous footage of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge.
Exactly. The wind hit the exact resonant frequency of the structure, the waves amplified each other, and the concrete literally tore itself apart.
So a perfect fraction destroys the system.
It traps the energy in a feedback loop. Now imagine you want to design a system that is totally open to energy, like a biological cell or a human brain.
You're constantly getting hit by wind, metaphorically speaking.
Constantly. But you don't want your system to lock into a single destructive frequency and shatter. You want it to be able to absorb all kinds of chaotic frequencies without breaking apart.
You want to avoid those standing waves.
Exactly. You want to avoid standing waves that trap energy. The golden ratio is mathematically the best way to do that. It completely prevents constructive interference.
Because it never perfectly lines up with any simple rhythm.
Right. It allows a complex system to have many, many interacting parts that never accidentally synchronize into a death spiral.
So staying alive is basically about avoiding the perfect beat.
In a profound way, yes. It's about being maximally distinctly connected.
Maximally distinctly connected.
You are deeply connected to the environment. You are processing its chaos, but your internal structure is just irrational enough that you don't get overwhelmed and dissolved by it. You surf the wave without becoming the wave.
That is such a vivid way to picture it. And the paper calls this dynamic the pulse ontology.
Pulse ontology.
Which I just have to say is a great name for a synthwave band.
It really is. But conceptually, pulse ontology just means that existence is inherently rhythmic.
We don't just exist as a continuous static block of time.
No, we pulse. We have a phase of dephasing.
Dephasing.
That's where we open up, we let the entropy in, we let the raw information flow from the outside world. That is the cosmic inhale. And then we transition to a phase of reattunement, where we take that information, organize it, build up our internal structure, and emit the waste heat back out. That is the exhale.
I see. So if I'm a radio, dephasing is scanning the frequencies to pick up a signal through all the static.
Yes.
And reattunement is locking onto the station to actually play the song.
That's a great analogy. Or think of an actual conversation like the one we're having right now.
Yeah.
You have to stop talking to listen. That's your intake, your dephasing. You're letting my entropy into your brain.
And then I have to process what you just said and form my own sentence. That's the structure, the reattunement.
Exactly. If you only ever listen, you dissolve into the noise, you lose your identity. If you only ever talk, you're just a rigid structure broadcasting static. You aren't interacting with reality. Life lives strictly in the trade-off between the two.
And the math says the perfect, sustainable trade-off point is that lambda value, 0.4812.
That seems to be the universal sweet spot, the point of maximum adaptability.
So if we combine part 1 and part 2 of our deep dive here, let's do it. Life starts because the Archean Earth needs to sweat out UV light. That is the thermodynamic imperative, the fire.
The fire.
But to survive, to persist for billions of years without burning up or freezing, it has to learn how to surf that energy flow using this golden ratio balance.
The surfboard.
Fire and surfboards. I love it. But now we have to talk about the ocean they're surfing on, because the literal ocean of Earth's history is full of hidden reefs, sharks, and absolute dead ends.
It is a graveyard. Which brings us back to the Great Filter.
The hard steps.
Right. When we look at Earth today, we tend to think, oh, evolution is just a straight line of progress.
Bacteria, then plants, then some fish crawl on land, then lizards, then monkeys, then eventually we get iPhones.
Right, an escalator of complexity.
Yeah.
But the actual fossil record tells a completely different story. It tells a story of extreme stalling, of life just getting totally stuck.
Let's talk about the boring billion.
The boring billion.
I love this term because it literally sounds like a bad era of television, but it refers to a genuine massive chunk of Earth's history.
It's actually closer to 1.5 billion years. This is the Proterozoic eon.
Paint the picture for us.
Life had already started. We had those UV-eating microbes we talked about. We even had cyanobacteria that had finally figured out oxygenic photosynthesis.
Which means they learned how to eat water and sunlight and spit out oxygen as a byproduct.
Exactly.
Which should be the ultimate game changer. Oxygen is high-octane fuel for biology. Once you have oxygen in the air, you can have large animals, you can have complex brains. So why didn't we get dinosaurs immediately?
Because the oxygen didn't stick.
What do you mean it didn't stick?
For over 1 billion years, the Earth is essentially trapped in a chemical loop. The bacteria would pump out a little bit of oxygen, but it would immediately get absorbed by all the exposed iron in the rocks, or it would react with the methane in the air.
It was getting neutralized as fast as it was produced.
Exactly. The atmospheric levels never rose high enough to support anything complex, so it was just a slime world.
A slime world.
Just endless, flat, purple and green mats of goo sitting in shallow water, doing the exact same thing day in, day out for 1 billion trips around the sun.
That is bleak. What finally broke the deadlock? Why aren't you and I just sentient slime mats right now?
This is where geology comes in as our first major candidate for the Great Filter. The EONS model, which stands for Earth Oxygenation and Natural Systematics, suggests that the primary bottleneck for that entire 1 billion years was phosphorus.
Phosphorus, like the fertilizer.
Exactly like the fertilizer. To have a massive, explosive bloom of life that can finally overwhelm the planetary chemistry and permanently oxygenate the atmosphere, you need an unfathomable amount of biomass.
You need a lot of bodies.
And to build those bodies, you need nutrients. The most critical limiting nutrient is phosphorus. But phosphorus is heavy. It's locked deep inside rocks. It doesn't just float around in the air like carbon or nitrogen.
So the bacteria were essentially starving.
They were strictly limited. They hit a hard productivity ceiling. The only way to get more phosphorus into the biosphere is to physically weather the continents.
Break the rocks down.
Right. You need rain, specifically slightly acidic rain falling on tall mountain ranges, dissolving the rock over millions of years, and washing that nutrient soup down the rivers and into the ocean.
Okay, but rain falls on mountains on other planets, right?
But here is the kicker. Earth's geology is incredibly unique. We have active plate tectonics. We have continental drift that constantly shoves new rock up into the sky to be weathered.
Mountains are constantly being rebuilt.
Exactly, and not every planet has plate tectonics.
Most don't, right?
Very few do. Mars doesn't have it anymore. Venus doesn't seem to have it.
Wow.
If Earth didn't have this specific violent conveyor belt of recycling crust, which was possibly kickstarted by the massive planetary collision that formed our moon, the phosphorus would have all just washed into the sea early on, settled to the dark bottom, and stayed there forever.
The bacteria would have just run out of food.
The oxygen levels would have crashed permanently, and Earth would just be what astrobiologists call a Gaia failure.
A Gaia failure.
It's just a wet, silent rock with a little bit of dying, starving slime on it.
So that is filter number 1. You don't just need a wet planet. You need a planet that is geologically violent enough to keep feeding the biosphere from the inside out.
Yes, and that takes us to filter number 2, which honestly is the one that really keeps me up at night.
Oh boy. Eukaryogenesis.
Eukaryogenesis, the rise of the complex cell.
Also known as the mansion cell.
The mansion cell. Look, for the first 2 billion years of life, Everything on Earth was a prokaryote.
Just basic bacteria and archaea.
Right. Think of a prokaryote like a tiny, extremely cheap studio apartment. It's just one room. The kitchen is right next to the bed, which is right next to the toilet.
Everything happens in the exact same chaotic space.
It's very efficient, it's rugged, they survive everywhere. But you can't build much complexity there. You simply cannot build a skyscraper out of studio apartments.
And you and I, trees, mushrooms, we are all made of eukaryotes.
We are made of mansions. Eukaryotes have distinct rooms. They have a protected nucleus to hold the DNA library safe. They have lysosomes to process waste in a separate chamber. And most importantly, they have a dedicated power plant down in the basement.
The mitochondria.
The mitochondria.
And the standard evolutionary story I learned in school was that one day a bacterium just slowly evolved into a mansion.
Right.
It just gradually added some rooms over millions of years.
That is what we used to think. But the modern genetic evidence says absolutely not. The transition from simple to complex didn't happen by gradual, slow evolution. It happened by sudden invasion.
Endosymbiosis.
Yes. Somewhere, deep in the ocean around 1.8 billion years ago, an archaea, which is a simple single-celled organism, physically swallowed a bacterium.
Just engulfed it.
Or maybe the bacterium burrowed inside the archaea to eat it from the inside. Either way, it was a hostile act.
Right.
And usually, 99.99% of the time, this ends in immediate death. The host digests the invader, or the invader multiplies like a virus and bursts the host apart.
Like a microscopic horror movie.
Exactly. But on this one specific day, in this one microscopic drop of ancient water, something literally impossible happened. They stalled.
They didn't kill each other.
The invader didn't die. It survived inside the host. And it started feeding off the host's waste products. And in return, it started leaking pure energy ATP back into the host.
They struck a truce.
They became a chimera, a completely new form of life.
And that internal trapped bacterium eventually became the mitochondria.
Yes. And because the host cell suddenly didn't have to generate its own energy anymore, it had this hyper-efficient fusion reactor living inside it. It could finally expand. It could afford to build a massive, complex genome. It could build the mansion.
And here's the ultimate great filter question. How often does that happen?
As far as we can tell from the genetic record, exactly once.
Wait.
In the entire 4.5 billion year history of Earth, with oceans full of octillions of bacteria interacting and eating each other every single second of every single day, this stable merger happened exactly one time. All plants, all animals, all fungi, all algae, every single complex living thing you see with your naked eye descends from that one singular freak accident.
That is staggeringly unlikely. I mean, if you ran the tape of Earth's history again from the start, would it even happen a second time?
Many biologists today think probably not. You might get a planet completely full of thriving bacteria that lasts perfectly fine until its sun burns out.
But they never make the jump.
They never make the jump to complexity because the studio apartment design works just fine for survival. There is no underlying evolutionary pressure to build a mansion unless you get that accidental miraculous energy boost from a swallowed cell.
So if we look up at the stars tonight, maybe there actually are billions of living worlds out there.
But they're all covered in slime.
Just slime. No trees, no fish, no brains building radio telescopes.
That is the rare Earth hypothesis in a nutshell. It's not that life itself is rare. Thermodynamics practically guarantees basic life, but complex life is vanishingly, terrifyingly rare.
The Clark source we analyzed put a hard number on it, didn't they?
They did. When you combine the mathematical odds of getting the right size star, being at the right distance, having the tectonic phosphorus weathering, and then surviving this singular, impossible eukaryotic merger, the probability of a technological civilization emerging is less than 1 in 10 to the power of 40.
1 in 10 to the 40th power.
Yes.
And for context, there are only about 10 to the 22nd power stars in the entire observable universe.
Right. So the math clearly dictates that we shouldn't be here. We are a massive statistical error.
That makes the silence of the night sky make a whole lot more sense.
It does.
It's not some dark forest conspiracy where aliens are hiding from each other. It's just brutal math. We are the only ones who rolled a 6 on the dice 20 times in a row.
Which brings us to the final and maybe most profound piece of our puzzle today.
Okay.
We survived the fire of the early Earth. We passed the filter of the single cell. We built the biological mansions. And eventually, over millions of years, those complex cells started working together to build brains.
Right.
And those brains started to resonate.
Let's bring it all the way back to the entropic resonance principle, ERP.
Yes.
We talked about it earlier at the cellular level, balancing order and chaos with the golden ratio to stay alive. But Kortwatt's paper argues that this principle is also the literal definition of consciousness itself.
It's his answer to the hard problem of consciousness.
Remind us what the hard problem is.
The hard problem is the central mystery of neuroscience. Why does processing information in the brain actually feel like something?
Right. My computer processes information, but it doesn't have an inner experience. It doesn't feel cold or happy.
Exactly. Why is there an inside to the human experience? Kortwatt argues that consciousness isn't a magical substance. It is a state of reflexive resonance.
Reflexive resonance, what does that look like?
Imagine you have a microphone and a speaker hooked up to each other.
Okay.
If you push the mic too close to the speaker, you get a violent feedback loop, a massive screech. That is pure chaos, extremely high entropy.
It hurts your ears.
Right. But if you pull them too far apart, you get absolute silence, no connection at all, zero interaction.
Okay.
But there is a physical sweet spot right in the middle, a distance where the system just hums.
It catches its own frequency.
It picks up its own signal, amplifies it slightly, modifies it with the room noise, and feeds it right back. It essentially hears itself.
And you're saying the physical brain is doing this exact thing with neural signals?
The brain is the ultimate resonance machine. It creates a massive coherence field. It fires millions of neurons in perfect sync. That's the structure.
They are variable.
But it also constantly lets in sensory data, the chaotic light and sound of the external world. That's the entropy, the H variable.
So consciousness is the act of balancing that internal hum with the external noise.
Yes. The theory states that subjective experience qualia, feeling, is the informational geometry of that specific resonance. And when we actually measure the electrical brain states of awake, conscious humans, guess what ratio we find between their integration and differentiation?
Please don't tell me it's the golden ratio again.
It hovers right around that exact lambda value, 0.4812.
That is deeply unsettling, but also beautiful.
It means we are surfing the absolute edge of chaos. Our inner life is a localized wave of resonance in a universe of noise.
And this framework actually explains why altered states of consciousness feel the way they do, doesn't it?
It gives us a strict mathematical geometry of mental states. Take psychedelics, psilocybin, for instance.
What does psilocybin physically do under this model?
It massively increases the entropy in the brain network. It chemically lowers the barrier to information flow. Suddenly, the H variable shoots through the roof.
The wave gets massive.
The wave gets overwhelmingly massive. And to survive, to maintain that crucial lambda ratio and not just dissolve into seizures, the brain has to frantically try to find new kinds of internal coherence.
So it starts connecting parts of the brain that usually never talk to each other.
Exactly. You start seeing sounds, you hear colors, you feel a deep structural oneness with the universe. That is just your system trying desperately to reattune to a massive influx of raw entropy.
That makes so much sense. And on the flip side of that spectrum, something like deep depression.
Clinical depression, or even catatonia, represents a state of overly high coherence and very low entropy.
So the structure is too strong.
The system becomes rigid, it's a frozen wave, it just repeats the exact same negative thoughts in a closed loop. It actively blocks out new, spontaneous information from the world. It's too orderly, it has stopped surfing the wave and has started sinking like a stone.
Wow.
Which is why introducing controlled entropy, whether through therapy disruption or certain medications, can help break that rigid coherence and get the system surfing again.
There was one part of the Kortwatt paper that I found genuinely haunting. It was the section on near-death experiences, NDEs.
Yes. That is a profound application of the theory.
We've all heard the cultural stories. Someone's heart stops on the operating table, the experience at the tunnel of light, the rapid life review, the feeling of absolute hyper-vivid reality.
Usually, mainstream science dismisses these accounts as just the random hallucinations of a dying brain, just sparks flying off the wiring as the engine finally fails.
But ERP gives it a really specific functional explanation.
It does. Think about the exact physiological moment of death. The body is rapidly failing. Cellular systems are shutting down completely. Physiological entropy is spiking almost vertically.
The chaos is literally flooding in. The physical dam is breaking.
Exactly. The H value is racing toward infinity. Now, if the brain's fundamental prime directive, its deep physical imperative from the dawn of time, is to maintain that resonance ratio, what does it do when H suddenly spikes?
It has to spike R. It has to spike its internal coherence to match it.
It has to rapidly generate a massive, unprecedented amount of internal order to balance the dying of the physical body.
Oh my God.
The paper suggests that the NDE, that sudden, highly structured, hyper-vivid experience of a tunnel or a celestial landscape, is the brain's final, desperate, maximum attempt to solve the equation.
It creates an entire world of pure coherence to match the flood of pure entropy.
It is the last flare of the match before the dark. It is a system trying to stay conscious, trying to stay perfectly resonant, even as the biological hardware completely disintegrates beneath it.
It's beautiful in a really tragic way.
It's the ultimate act of surfing.
So let's zoom out here. We have covered an immense amount of ground.
We have
We have a physical universe that literally demands life to cool itself down.
the thermodynamic imperative.
We have a rocky planet that struggled for billions of years to provide the precise geological nutrients and the 1 in a trillion lucky cellular breaks just to build complex bodies.
Hard steps.
We have a brain that uses the irrational math of the golden ratio to surf the edge of chaos and actually feel the universe.
Entropic resonance.
And as far as we can tell, looking out into the silent night sky, we are the only ones who made it this far.
That is the heavy verdict. We are likely completely alone.
I feel like people react to that alone verdict in two very distinct ways. One is profound despair. People think it's just us. That's so lonely. That's so terrifyingly pointless.
It can feel that way. But the other reaction, the one I prefer, is a deep sense of ultimate responsibility.
How so?
Think about what we just concluded about consciousness. It is the universe literally hearing itself. It's the feedback loop of existence.
Right.
If we are the only ones who pass the filter, then we are the universe's only mirror.
We are the only way it knows it exists.
Without us, the universe is just a huge collection of rocks and gas interacting in the absolute dark. There is no redness to a rose without a resonant brain to perceive it. There is no sadness. There is no joy. There is just line math.
We provide the quality. We provide the inside of the universe.
Exactly. We are the sole custodians of meaning. If we wipe ourselves out, if we fail to handle our own collective entropy, the lights go out in this galaxy. And maybe they stay out forever.
And we are definitely facing some pretty massive entropy spikes right now, aren't we, as a species?
We are entering the realm of the future filters.
Climate change, artificial intelligence, nuclear proliferation.
These are massive societal tests. We are generating unfathomable amounts of entropy globally, both physical heat in the atmosphere and sheer informational chaos online.
The wave is getting huge again.
The wave is towering over us, and the ultimate question of the Great Filter is, can our civilization generate enough coherence to match it? Can we organize ourselves politically, socially, and emotionally to handle the godlike power we've unlocked?
We basically need to find that golden ratio at a global societal level.
We do. We cannot survive by being rigid and totalitarian.
Right.
That's the societal depression trap, the frozen wave. It shatters eventually.
Right.
And we obviously can't just let absolute chaos and misinformation reign. That's the psychedelic track, complete dissolution. We have to collectively find that resonant middle path. We have to learn to surf together.
You know, when we started this deep dive today, I asked everyone to look up at the silence of the stars, and I said it made me feel small.
Yeah.
But now, after going through the thermodynamics and the cellular biology and the resonance, I really don't feel small anymore.
I feel
Precarious.
Precarious is the right word.
Like we are walking a cosmic tightrope.
We are. We are a tiny, fragile flame trying to stay lit in the middle of a galactic hurricane.
Yeah.
But remember the very first thing we discussed. The hurricane actually created the flame. The fundamental laws of thermodynamics wanted us to be here to dissipate the light.
That's true.
The universe isn't actively trying to snuff us out. It's trying to use us to process itself. We just have to be smart enough and resonant enough to keep the process going.
The universe isn't trying to snuff us out, it's trying to use us. That is a thought that is going to stick with me for a long time.
It's a complete perspective shift. We aren't just passengers in the dark. We are the crew.
Well, on that incredible note, I think we have reached the end of our stack of research for today. We've gone from the UV-baked Archean oceans all the way to the absolute limits of galactic consciousness.
It has been quite a trip.
To you, the learner listening out there, thank you for taking this ride with us today. It was a heavy one.
Definitely a heavy one, but necessary.
Absolutely. My advice for you tonight, find a quiet spot. Look up at that massive empty sky. Don't be afraid of the great silence. Really listen to it and realize that the very fact that you can hear it, that you can think about it and feel it, is the most improbable, magnificent miracle in the universe.
Keep resonating.
Exactly. Keep resonating. We'll see you in the next deep dive.